Revenge with Karen.
We're terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out, she said, without even looking up from her brand new company-issued laptop, still halfway through logging into her Slack account for the first time. The CEO's daughter-in-law. Day 1. Office 1, me. No handshake. No explanation. Just a trembling junior HR rep standing behind her like he was watching someone defuse a bomb with a spatula. Ink on her onboarding packet was still wet, and she was already playing executioner. She had her blonde hair in a high ponytail, her resume printed on thick cream cardstock, and her MBA confidence inflated like a bounce house at a divorce party. She didn't ask questions. She didn't even blink. Just read the line off her iPad, word for word. You could tell someone coached her. Probably her husband, or her father-in-law, or the mirror. I didn't flinch and argue. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and handed over my badge with the kind of grace you learn after 30 years of swallowing power plays and gritting through boardroom egos. She thought she was firing me. Thought this was her first big move. All I said was, I want to do this right. Tell your father-in-law the board meeting in 3 hours should be interesting. Then I walked out, past the silent HR rep, past the security guard who looked more confused than concerned, past the framed photo of the founding family in the lobby that, funny enough, left out the woman who actually wrote the bylaws they built their entire empire on. And hey, while I've got you here, if this already feels like the kind of corporate chaos that makes your jaw drop, do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button and give it a like. Not because I'm begging, I've been kicked out of nicer offices, because it really helps the team keep unearthing these stories and exposing what really happens behind those glass doors. You'd be surprised how often the person getting fired is the one holding the leash. Now, back to our regularly scheduled downfall. 3 hours. That's how long she had between her first firing and her first legal disaster. In that time, I imagine she celebrated. Maybe popped a little champagne in her corner office, my old office, if we're being precise. Maybe drafted up a chipper little LinkedIn post about decisive leadership and tough calls. Hell, she probably already had the hashtags queued up. #leadership, #next chapter, #girlboss, or whatever buzzword her personal brand consultant told her to sprinkle in. Meanwhile, the board packet had already gone out. Clause 17C. Titled plainly, Emergency Reassignment and Voting Suspension Trigger, buried in the original shareholder agreement like a landmine nobody expected to step on. Written by yours truly. Reviewed by legal. Signed by every investor who ever asked, but what happens if leadership goes rogue? The answer? If an executive is terminated without a formal board vote, and that termination is initiated by an appointee with no equity, well, then the appointee loses all interim authority. The board convenes within the day. Voting power reverts to the majority shareholder. Me. Because while she was sipping bubbly and measuring for new curtains, I was filing that clause activation. Dated, signed, timestamped, and couriered to every board member, investor, and general counsel tied to this company. And unlike her welcome packet, mine came with a certified return receipt. She thought I'd go quietly. What she didn't know was that I never built this company to be seen. I built it to be safe, from people exactly like her. Entitled, impatient, handed power like it came with the family Wi-Fi password. She wasn't the first to underestimate me, but she might just be the last. Because by the time her LinkedIn post got halfway drafted, her name had already been flagged in the system. Unrecognized executive, no voting rights, pending shareholder review, and the founder, her father-in-law, still hadn't seen the packet, but he would. Oh, he would. There's a reason my name doesn't appear in the glossy company brochures or on the About Us page. I was the shadow in the scaffolding, the clause in the contract, the call you made when the boardroom lights were off and the SEC was circling like a hawk. I never wanted the spotlight. I wanted structure, stability, leverage, and equity. God, the equity. While they were naming conference rooms after founders' grandkids and handing out plaques to people who'd been here 5 fiscal quarters, I was taking payment in percentages. Half a point here, a full point there. Equity, not bonuses. Voting shares, not titles. Every time a deal closed or an investor came sniffing, I negotiated another sliver. Quietly. Efficiently. I didn't play poker, I built the table and printed the cards. It started back when the company was 2 folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a founder who thought compliance was a dirty word. He was a visionary, sure, but the kind who couldn't remember if we'd paid our vendors, or if we'd accidentally sent 6 figures to the guy who painted our break room. I stepped in, streamlined, stabilized, secured. And for my trouble, he offered me a VP title. I declined, asked for stock instead. You'd rather own the ceiling than sit under it, he joked. Exactly, I said. By year 3, I was sitting on 18%. By year 8, 41%. The CFO left in a screaming match over misallocated funds. I picked up his shares at a deep discount. He needed the money. Divorce is expensive. And when the founder's brother tried to sue us into oblivion and failed spectacularly, he offered to settle privately. I took the remaining 31% in exchange for bulletproof NDA and a promise never to leak the family's offshore disaster. 72%. That's where I sat, quietly. No fanfare, no parades, just majority ownership, neatly filed in the Delaware Registry. And nestled inside that ownership was Clause 17C, a weird little appendix section nobody ever bothered to read because, quote, we'd never need that. The clause said that if a non-equity exec ever terminated a corporate officer without board vote, all executive powers would be suspended pending shareholder review. It was a clause for emergencies, betrayals, stupidity. I wrote it after a younger version of our founder's nephew tried to fire the entire marketing department during a tantrum. I watched his LinkedIn go dark in 48 hours. That was the last time anyone touched power they didn't earn. Until now. Because what Blondie didn't understand, what nobody told her in her overpriced business school, was that inheriting a title doesn't mean inheriting control. Control isn't gifted. It's not in your last name or on your office door. It's in the contracts, in the fine print, in the clause written during a 2 a.m. call with a paranoid investor from Boston who wanted to know what would happen if someone's idiot kid got promoted. Turns out, it activates exactly like this. One smug little firing. No board vote, no cause, no process. Just a girl with fresh teeth whitened and a new email signature, strutting into my office like she was casting a reboot of Succession. She had no clue that by reading that script, she triggered a corporate trapdoor that's been bolted shut for 17 years, just waiting for someone dumb enough to step on it. Now, that clause was live. I didn't just send the activation letter, I sent a full legal packet, shareholder statements, equity breakdown, archived email approvals, timestamped documents, notarized copies, even included her little termination memo, signed and dated, complete with its grammatical errors and HR cosign. They'd laugh about that one later. Well, someone would. Because while she was figuring out how to order office plants and get her keycard upgraded, the board was reading a memo titled Immediate Suspension of Executive Authority, Clause 17C. She was about to learn what real power looks like. And the founder had no idea his newest family heirloom had just stepped on a landmine with her name engraved on the trigger. But that call was coming, and he wouldn't be laughing. Somewhere on the 20th floor, in a glass-walled office she hadn't earned and didn't understand, the CEO's daughter-in-law poured herself a flute of celebratory champagne. The kind of bottle they save for IPOs or exits, neither of which were on her horizon. She popped the cork like she'd just slayed a dragon, not fired the woman who was the dragon, and replaced her with absolutely no one. First day, first problem solved, she texted her husband. Time to clean house. She kicked off her heels, crossed her legs like she'd seen in a million stock photo CEO poses, and opened her laptop to begin drafting a LinkedIn post that would have made any PR intern vomit from secondhand embarrassment. Something about making tough calls for long-term vision. She paused halfway through typing leadership is an action, not a title, unaware she was about to lose both. Meanwhile, downstairs, metaphorically and literally, the board members were opening a very different kind of bottle, one sealed in a fireproof FedEx envelope stamped confidential. Clause 17C activation. The courier had arrived 15 minutes prior, handed the packets to executive assistants like they were jury summons, and left without a word. Inside that packet was a 3-inch thick stack of hell. Cover page, Clause 17C activation, shareholder transition proposal. Subheading, request for immediate emergency board meeting under bylaw 8.4. Attached was a signed trigger letter, dated that morning, timestamped at 7:03 a.m., hours before I was ever terminated. Accompanying it, complete equity breakdown. Every share I'd acquired over 20 years, every transaction, every co-signed agreement, a full portfolio ledger with notarizations and verified filings. The reaction wasn't instant. It was worse. It was slow, That creeping kind of dread when you realize you're not in trouble, you're in litigation, and just hadn't checked your email yet. By the time the founder's personal counsel skimmed the clause and hit the key phrase, suspension of executive authority upon unilateral termination by non-equity appointee, he actually said aloud, "Oh no." And then again, quieter, "Oh no." The packet also included a meeting mandate. The board was legally required to convene within 3 hours. That timer had already started. I made sure of that. I didn't need to be in the building. The law was. The contracts were. And by the time her celebratory Instagram story hit champagne on deck, first move made. With a boomerang of clinking glasses, her name was already flagged by LegalZoom and DocuSign logs as the sole initiator of a termination she had no authority to make. Meanwhile, across the city and in 2 time zones, the board members were canceling lunches, skipping golf, and calling their assistants to reschedule quarterly reviews. They weren't happy. They were trapped. Because once Clause 17C activates, it's not about office politics anymore. It's about fiduciary duty, voting rights, SEC exposure, their personal assets, their names on filings they never reviewed. This wasn't some family spat. This was a legally binding reversion of control, and there, in black and white, was the number they hadn't thought about in years: 72% majority shareholder, voting control. Clause trigger, emergency recall of all executive appointments made in the last 48 hours. Immediate revocation of non-board sanctioned authority. My authority. Reinstated the moment hers was voided. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top. The clause wasn't just real, it was irreversible once filed. That little fact had been added during a very specific investor scare years ago. They wanted assurance that if someone did go rogue, couldn't undo the emergency meeting with a panicked apology and a retracted memo. There was no take-back button. So while she strutted through the hallway with her little clipboard and tried to figure out how to access the internal financial systems, the boardroom chairs were already being filled. The founder hadn't arrived yet, but his phone had buzzed. Twice, and both times he ignored the screen. The third time, he picked up. And everything changed. Founder was mid-backswing on hole 7 at the country club he half-funded, chewing a cigar that matched his tan and his ego when the first call came in. Ignored. Second one too. It wasn't until the third ring, persistent, sharp, from his general counsel's personal line, that he grunted, dropped the club, and snapped, "This better be good." What followed wasn't good. It wasn't even bad. It was catastrophic. "I need you back at headquarters," the voice on the other end said. "Ice cold now." "What? Why?" he barked. "You need to hear this in person." She signed something. Click. He didn't finish the round, didn't tip the caddy, didn't change out of his cleats. Just stormed to the Escalade and made it back to the office in under 20 minutes, an Olympic record for someone who usually required 2 assistants and a valet just to get through the front door. When he arrived, legal was waiting. So was his CFO, one trembling assistant, a half-full conference room where nobody was smiling anymore. The general counsel didn't waste time. Just opened a leather folder, took a breath, and read. Per Clause 17C of the amended shareholder agreement, any executive termination carried out by a non-equity appointee, without prior board vote, shall result in immediate revocation of all interim leadership authority. Suspension of C-suite appointments made within the past 48 hours. Automatic deferment of executive control to the majority shareholder, pending emergency board review. The founder froze. For a second, he looked like he hadn't heard English. Then his jaw clenched, his temples pulsed, and he growled, "Who signed the termination?" No one answered. He asked again. Louder, more desperate. "Who the hell signed the termination?" The CFO swallowed hard, eyes flicking to the junior assistant, who looked like she might vomit into her tablet. Finally, the general counsel responded, flat and unforgiving, "Your daughter-in-law, alone." The silence in that room was surgical. The founder blinked once, slowly, then again. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug behind his ears. She doesn't have sign-off authority," he said, as if saying it aloud could somehow roll back the clock. "No," the attorney said. "She doesn't. She never did. She's CSO. She was appointed CSO. By you, ratified by the board. And she holds 0 equity. Her authority is entirely derivative, which means under Clause 17C, her unilateral termination of a corporate officer is invalid and illegal." The founder ran a hand over his mouth, pacing, muttering under his breath, "Jesus, Jesus Christ," then louder, "This is a misunderstanding. I'll talk to her. We'll rescind," the lawyer didn't let him finish. "There is no rescind," The clause is live. It's been triggered. Paperwork was filed before the termination was executed. Time-stamped, notarized, and distributed to all investors. You've got 2 hours left before the emergency meeting begins. But she's family, he tried. She's not shareholding family, the attorney cut in. And right now, she's sitting in your former advisor's office, eating strawberries and asking how to change the company mission statement. The founder sat down, hard, like the chair had punched him. His hands were shaking. No longer the swaggering patriarch of a billion-dollar portfolio. Just an aging man who realized he handed a loaded gun to someone who thought the safety was optional. "Where is she?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Probably writing a press release," the CFO muttered. He looked up, eyes red now. "What do we do?" The general counsel closed the folder. "You sit in that boardroom, you listen, you do not interrupt. And when she walks in, because she will walk in, you remember that she holds 72% of this company." "God help us all," he said, mostly to himself. And as he stood, slowly, painfully, you could see it land in his gut like a gut punch from his own past. He never gave her power. She took it, one clause at a time. When the termination memo was signed that morning, the first thing the daughter-in-law did, before the coffee even finished brewing, send a Slack to IT. "Please deactivate all access for redacted. Immediate lockout. Full system sweep. No thanks, no signature, just corporate bark typed with manicured nails." She was still basking in the buzz of perceived authority, probably thinking she was making history instead of tripping a wire. She CC'd 3 directors and added a smiley face to soften the blow, like emojis could patch legal sinkholes. IT director saw the message at 9:22 a.m. He stared at it, then at the terminal, then at the internal registry list, the real one, not the vanity dashboards that the C-suite used for board presentations. This was the back end, the bones. And right there, in bold text, primary administrator redacted, compliance authority token holder redacted, legal digital signatory for contractual binding redacted, shareholder registry control redacted, equity stake control access 72.04% redacted. He did not freeze the account. He did not lock her out. He did not even reply. Instead, he walked his laptop to legal, sat it down gently like a bomb with a timer ticking under the keyboard, and said she's still wired in. Fully. "If I deactivate her, we lose access to 3 compliance tools, 7 investor portals, the SEC auto-filing API, the shareholder ledger." Legal didn't even look up. Don't touch it. 10 minutes later, the daughter-in-law strolled by, acting like she ran the place. IT guy said nothing. Legal said less. The building had gone quiet, hushed like a hospital wing before bad news. Back in her office, she returned to her half-finished LinkedIn post. She read it aloud once. "Today, I made my first difficult decision as Chief Strategy Officer. Leadership means prioritizing the health of the company, even when it's uncomfortable. I'm proud of our direction. #leadership, #strategic thinking, #next chapter." She stared at the blinking cursor. Added a line, "A new era begins." But her fingers didn't move to hit post. Not yet, because something was off. Her inbox had gone quiet. No new messages from legal. No congratulatory replies from the board. And she noticed something else. Digital dashboard that usually displayed voting thresholds and operational metrics. It was grayed out. Like someone had flipped a switch she didn't know existed. She tried accessing the cap table. Error. She tried approving her own expense request. Denied. She tried to schedule a leadership memo through internal comms. Blocked. The digital systems weren't crashing. They were rejecting her. And then, as if summoned by dread itself, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One text. The lead investor. "What's happening?" I thought she was untouchable. She reread it twice, mouth dry, then checked the sender. Confirmed it wasn't a prank. Lead investor. The one who personally flew across the country last year to beg her to mediate a merger. Untouchable. That word wasn't about her. It was about the woman she had just tried to delete. The same woman still listed as primary signatory on every single system. Same woman whose name appeared in the digital registry like the root directory of a network she never even learned to navigate. The same woman who, according to the cap table archived in their investor portal, still owned the place. She looked at her LinkedIn post. "Today I made my first difficult decision," backspaced. All of it. The post stayed in drafts. She didn't even close the window. Just stared at it, pale now. One hand frozen on the mouse. In another office, founder's face was buried in his hands. And across the building, The IT director was calmly backing up a copy of the registry to a secure drive labeled per clause 17C. That was the moment the daughter-in-law realized something that business school never taught her. You don't delete a queen from the board. You just trigger her next move. The boardroom was already full by the time she arrived, the kind of full that doesn't allow for conversation. Just glances, clipped whispers. Whispers shuffled for show. No pastries, no coffee, just water. Ice melting slowly in sweating glasses, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees and nobody wanted to say it out loud. She walked in wearing a cream-colored power suit that had never seen a courtroom, her expression that same glossy smugness she'd worn all morning, like this was just another meeting on a checklist. She clutched her leather portfolio, oblivious to the storm she'd walked into. A few heads turned, but none with the smile she was expecting. Most avoided eye contact altogether. "Good afternoon," she chirped, giving a little nod to the chair at the head of the table. She moved toward it. Nobody moved to stop her, until she was halfway seated. Then, the board chair, an old man with fingers like driftwood and a memory like a filing cabinet, cleared his throat. "You can observe, of course," he said flatly. "But that seat is reserved." She blinked. Stopped mid-motion. Reserved for who? The room didn't answer. Instead, the general counsel spoke from the far end of the table, flipping a thick packet of documents closed with surgical calm. "Per clause 17C of the shareholder agreement, your appointment as chief strategy officer has been suspended effective immediately, pending shareholder review." Her voice was small but sharp. "Excuse me?" "Suspended," the counsel repeated. "Void, legally speaking. You hold no equity, or did not vote on your position. The termination you initiated this morning was unauthorized, and under the clause, all executive authority granted to you has been revoked." She looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to intervene. The founder, silent, staring at a spot on the table like it had insulted him personally. The CFO, looking down at his phone, scrolling like he was trying to fast forward through reality. Even her own husband, seated near the end. Meet her eyes. He looked like he was trying to become the chair itself. She started, voice faltering. "I don't understand. That clause, wasn't it just a hypothetical? I mean, no one's used it before." The legal advisor adjusted his glasses. "It's in effect. It was activated with proper documentation this morning. Time-stamped, notarized, and distributed before your action was initiated." She tried to laugh, just a little, way she did at cocktail parties when someone told a joke she didn't get. "Okay, but who even triggered it?" No one answered. Just a long pause, heavy enough to bend the walls. She looked at the founder, pleading now. He didn't move. Finally, the chair leaned back, the leather groaning like it was judging her. "She did," he said simply. "The one you tried to erase." That name wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be, because her presence was already in the room, felt, not seen, like the gravity had shifted toward an invisible center. The woman she tried to fire was everywhere. In the papers they were holding. In the emails they were rereading. In the clause they all forgot until it activated like a fire alarm in a locked vault. She hadn't even entered the building, and still she owned it. The daughter-in-law stood there, not knowing what to do with her hands. For the first time all day, she looked young, like a kid who accidentally opened the wrong door in a courtroom and wandered onto a trial where her name was the headline. "But she's not even in the company anymore." She tried again, voice thinner now. "She was never just in the company," the legal counsel said quietly. "She is the company." And with that, the chair gestured to an empty seat at the far end, not the head. "If you'd like to observe," he said, "please sit there." Quietly. She hesitated, moved like someone walking into a wake, not a meeting. Her heels echoed too loud. She sat. She did not speak again. And when she glanced back at the head of the table, there was now an empty seat with a gold-plated name card being quietly set down by the assistant. A seat reserved for someone who hadn't arrived yet, but whose silence was louder than anything they'd heard all year. At exactly 2:59 p.m., the door handle turned. Slow, deliberate, could feel the room tense like a live wire. Nobody spoke. Even the daughter-in-law stopped fiddling with her pen. She walked in at 3 o'clock on the dot, no rush, no fanfare. She wore the same black suit they'd seen her in 1,000 times before, tailored like a second skin. Not flashy, not loud, but unmistakably hers. The kind of presence that didn't need introduction or explanation. She didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't ask permission. She walked straight to the head of the table, the seat the founder hadn't touched since the claws landed like a guillotine, and placed a leather folder in front of her. She didn't sit. She opened it and read. Her voice was calm, not theatrical, not emotional, just fact. As majority shareholder, she said, I formally request a binding vote to rescind all C-suite appointments made in the past 48 hours pending shareholder review. The words hit like bricks. No reaction at first, just silence, as if the room had swallowed its own breath. Then the chair cleared his throat. Motion received, logged, will be entered into record for immediate consideration. Still, no one moved. The founder didn't speak. He didn't even lift his eyes. Just sat there, back hunched, staring at the glass pitcher in front of him like he couldn't figure out how it got there. He looked smaller, like someone had reached into his chest and pulled out the confidence that used to carry him through IPOs, acquisition talks, and 3 different lawsuits without flinching. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. The daughter-in-law looked like she might faint. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hands, so steady hours earlier when she signed a firing memo with a signature that meant nothing, now trembled around the edges of her notepad. And still, she didn't speak. Nobody did, because there it was, written, spoken, witnessed, a reminder that she hadn't lost control when she was escorted out. She had given them the illusion of it. Let them play dress-up with titles and corner offices and LinkedIn banners while she pulled strings behind soundproofed legal armor. They thought she'd walk away. They thought the badge meant power. But she wasn't an employee. She was the owner. And this was her reminder. The lawyer confirmed the filing. Clause 17C empowers majority shareholder authority to override interim executive decisions pending board verification. A vote may proceed. The chair nodded. Motion is live. Board will reconvene privately for confirmation. You'll be informed of the results by close of business. I'll stay, she said. Not a request, not a threat. Just a statement of fact. Someone asked softly, would you like to take a seat? She finally turned, looked at the empty head chair. Back at them all? No, she said, I'll stand. It wasn't defiance, it was dominance. Quiet, absolute, and terrifying, because you don't sit when you already own the table. And she did. The board knew it, the founder knew it. Hell, even the Wi-Fi access logs knew it. She still had superuser privileges no one dared deactivate. The founder finally spoke. A whisper, you set this up. Her eyes locked on his. I protected what you handed to children. No one interrupted, because what was there to say? She never stormed, never screamed, never sent a single passive-aggressive email. She waited, watched, let them think they were in control. And now she'd reminded every person in that room, every suit, every strategist, every legacy name in a padded chair, that sometimes power isn't loud. It's silent, strategic, patient, and impossible to fire. The boardroom cleared slowly, like people evacuating a church after an unexpected exorcism. No eye contact, no chatter, just quiet chair scrapes and shuffling folders, every director painfully aware they'd just witnessed something tectonic shift under their feet. She remained standing. Not because she needed to prove a point, she was the point. A living claws and heels. Her folder still sat closed, perfectly aligned with the edge of the table. She didn't need notes. She had the room memorized, the players, the clauses. The silence that followed her wasn't awkward. It was earned. Founder lingered last, pretending to reread his own notes, but mostly just delaying what he knew was coming. Eventually, when the door clicked behind the final straggler, he looked up. Can we speak privately? He asked. She gave the faintest nod and walked to a small adjoining room off the boardroom, meant for sidebar conversations that usually involved bonuses, not ultimatums. He followed, slow, every step weighted with the past 2 decades he thought he controlled. She didn't sit, he did, and for a few seconds neither said a word. Just the soft hum of the building's HVAC and the distant beep of a printer somewhere in the hallway. He finally broke. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, she said, voice even. You need to choose. She opened the folder one last time, slid 2 sheets across the table, side by side. No theatrics, just the terms. Left page, buyout proposal. Purchase of her 72% stake at 10 times current valuation. Clean, no litigation. No clause left in the carcass. He could keep the building, the name, the shell. Right page, reorganization terms. She remains majority shareholder, executive chairwoman, immediate restructuring of the entire C-suite, departmental audits, asset tracebacks. No more nepotism, no more ceremonial titles. She takes the reins. Publicly, stared at both like they were written in ancient script. I need time, he murmured. She didn't blink. You had time. His eyes flicked up. There was no venom in hers, no spite. Just the unflinching clarity of someone who spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment while everyone else played musical chairs with titles. I never meant for it to get like this, he said weakly. She tilted her head. Then you should have read what you signed. That line landed hard, because it wasn't cruel, it was accurate. He reached for the buyout sheet, hand hovering, but didn't touch it. You'd walk away, just like that, clean house or sell, she said. But I won't let this place rot under your name. He flinched at your name. Because the truth was, her name had always been absent from the plaques, but present in the bylaws, the financials, the risk audits, the contracts he never actually read. Her name was in the footnotes that made the empire legal. You want revenge? He asked, almost to himself. She didn't answer, because it wasn't revenge. It was structure, consequences. The quiet kind that comes when you ignore a leak for so long it becomes the flood. He sat back, rubbing his temples like he could knead time backwards. She stood perfectly still, letting him writhe in the reality he had built on assumptions and last names. After a long pause, he asked, "How long do I have?" He picked up the buyout paper and folded it once neatly. "You'll get the formal offer tonight, 24 hours. Then she turned, leaving the reorg proposal where it lay. As she reached the door, she stopped. "One more thing." He looked up. "When she walked into my office and fired me," she said, her voice low and steady, "she didn't make a mistake. She made a choice." Then she opened the door and left him alone with the one thing he feared more than losing control, living in the world where he never actually had it. The next morning, the building felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just stripped of pretense, like someone had peeled back the wallpaper and found the original blueprint beneath. There was no announcement, no Slack blast, no celebratory donuts in the break room. Just a single calendar update on everyone's schedule, emergency transition, debrief, executive attendance mandatory. The founder didn't show. Instead, his resignation email went out 5 minutes before the meeting. "After many wonderful years, I am stepping down for personal reasons. I have full confidence in the board and shareholders to guide the company forward." No one replied. The daughter-in-law arrived at 8:57 a.m. in a muted gray blazer and flats, confidence deflated, eyeliner smudged like she hadn't slept. Her badge didn't beep when she tried to enter the main conference floor. Security guard approached her gently, respectfully, and offered to escort her out. She didn't fight it. She didn't ask to speak to anyone. She just handed over the badge, the company phone, and the keys to the office that had never really been hers. As they walked her past the reception desk, she glanced up at the digital wallboard where execs' names used to scroll in glossy animation. It had already been updated. Upline, executive chairwoman appointed by majority shareholder. No photo, just the title. The new executive team gathered at 9 o'clock sharp. Not a ragtag group of legacy ladder climbers, but a surgical unit of investor appointees, people who knew how to rebuild a company without needing a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Legal sat beside compliance. Finance next to governance. No motivational posters, no empty titles, no illusions. She entered last. Still no fanfare. She walked straight to the head of the table. This time she sat. They began with action items, C-suite role audits, equity realignment procedures, contract rewrites. Nothing dramatic, nothing chaotic, just the meticulous, quiet labor of a woman reclaiming the house she designed with her own hands. At one point, someone joked, "We should print out Clause 17C and frame it." She didn't laugh, just nodded once. "Make sure it's visible." Meeting ended on schedule. No applause, no press release, just motion, movement, a return to real leadership. She stood and gathered her folder, pausing as the room cleared. Then she walked the same hallway she'd been marched down days earlier, the same tiles, the same scuffed corner where someone's rolling suitcase always caught. Only this time, people didn't avoid eye contact. They nodded, opened doors, made space. She passed the IT office. Director gave her a thumbs up and said, "Admin rights restored." Already rerouted. She didn't stop walking. She passed the compliance wall and paused just long enough to notice that the outdated org chart had been removed. Someone had left the nails in the drywall, like a reminder that nothing is permanent, but some things leave marks. And finally, she reached the lobby. Same receptionist, same desk. Except this time, she didn't walk past it. She stopped, set her folder down. With a smile that wasn't smug, just real, she said, "Tell them I'll need new badge access. Preferably something with a gold chip." Then she picked up her things and walked out like she'd never left, not because she returned, but because she'd never been gone. Power didn't come from a title, or a nameplate, or a bloodline. It came from knowing the wiring inside the walls, the ink in the contracts, the rules everyone else forgot until they were reminded. And now, everyone remembered exactly who built the building. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch flicking chaos alive. Your ex boss is shaking in their loafers.